Well, first up, Union Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal on Wednesday assured members of Parliament that India has successfully safeguarded the interests of sensitive sectors, particularly agriculture and dairy, in the trade framework agreement with the United States, while ensuring significant benefits for Indian exporters. Take a look.
India's Minister of Commerce and Industry, Piyush Goyal, delivered a statement in Parliament on India-US Trade Framework Agreement, the details of which are being finalized. The minister assured Parliament on Wednesday that the Indian side has successfully safeguarded the nation's interests related to sensitive sectors, especially agriculture and dairy.
कृषि क्षेत्र में भारत की प्रमुख संवेदनशीलता को पूर्णतः ध्यान रखा गया है। साथ ही यह साझेदारी लघु एवं मध्यम उद्यमों MSMEs, उद्यमियों, कुशल श्रमिकों और उद्योग के लिए नए अवसर खोलेगी।
Minister further said that the India and US understanding aligns with India's vision of Make in India, Design in India and Innovate in India for the world and is a significant step towards Viksit Bharat 2047 and Atmanirbhar Bharat. On energy imports, Piyush Goyal reiterated that ensuring energy security for 140 crore Indians remains the government's top priority. He said diversifying energy sources is central to India's strategy as the country moves towards becoming a developed nation. Piyush Goyal also informed the members of parliament that both sides will work together to conclude the technical details and paperwork and detailed contours of which will be announced after all procedures are completed.
मैं स्पष्ट करना चाहता हूं, जैसा कि सरकार ने कई बार सार्वजनिक रूप से कहा है कि 140 करोड़ भारतीयों की ऊर्जा आवश्यकताओं की सुरक्षा सुनिश्चित करना सरकार की सर्वोत्तम प्राथमिकता है। वस्तुनिष्ठ बाजार स्थितियों और बदलते अंतर्राष्ट्रीय परिदृश्यों के अनुरूप ऊर्जा स्रोतों में विविधता लाना हमारी इस कार्यनीति का मूल आधार है। भारत की सभी कार्रवाइयां इसी बात को ध्यान में रखकर की जाती हैं। अतः मैं माननीय सदस्यों से इन मुद्दों को समुचित दृष्टिकोण से देखने का आग्रह करता हूं।
Reduction of US tariffs to 18% has been the biggest takeaway so far from the developments which took place on Monday following a phone call made by US President Donald Trump to Prime Minister Modi. Bureau Report, DD India.
Well, let's talk about tariff detente that India has in the first place reached with the US. Joining us is Ambassador Mohan Kumar, a former senior diplomat with a lot of experience, in fact, in India's earlier trade negotiations, both at the GATT and WTO levels. Good evening to you, Ambassador Mohan Kumar. Now, do you get a sense that everyone is jumping the gun over this development and it would be better to wait for a final picture or text, black and white stuff to emerge?
Absolutely, Gautam. Thank you very much for having me. I think what viewers need to understand is that, number one, as you rightly say, we will have to look at the fine print. You cannot assess a trade deal unless you look at the T's and the I's, as it were. The second thing that I want to note is that this is the first phase of the negotiation, according to spokespersons of the American government. So you will have to see this as an ongoing negotiation where I think this part of the trade agreement is over, but obviously there is unfinished business. I think what I want to underline is that the 50% tariff was hurting Indian traders. It was hurting the Indian economy. That will be lifted forthwith, and we will reach the level of 18%. That may not be brilliant. 0% obviously would be better, but you would have to say that it leaves us in a much better position vis-a-vis our South Asian neighbors and also vis-a-vis countries of East Asia. So what we should do right now is compliment the government and welcome the tariff reduction. It's not come a day too soon. And then our negotiators will continue to dot the I's and cross the T's, as it were, with the American negotiators.
Right, and from what Donald Trump put out on Truth Social on Monday, isn't the only clear-cut, concrete inference to be drawn is related to the tariff reduction that you spoke of by the US on Indian goods?
Yes, and that's the most important thing, Gautam, frankly. I mean, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. The traders and the industry were hurting at 50%. That has come down to 18%. I also want to tell you that there is a certain market sentiment and there is a certain investment sentiment which will start picking up. They will not wait for the final agreement to be signed by the two sides. What the sentiment, and that is why you see the Sensex and others react to this deal. What the investors will look for is medium to long term, and they will already be looking to invest in India. Other countries will be looking to export and import from India. I think the last point I want to make is that this also comes close on the heels of the FTA that we have concluded with the European Union. It shows India's trade policy now is on the offensive, number one. Number two, we signal to the world that we are open for business. And third, we have every intention of carrying out an aggressive trade policy, which will then set us on the path to achieve Viksit Bharat. So that
Okay.
seems to me the strategy of the government.
Okay, that's a point well driven home. But let me just ask you, we all know that Donald Trump is somewhat given to hyperbole. Let's talk about the kind of deals, so-called deals that he announced, the slew of trade deals that he announced with different developed and emerging economies. What do we know about the final shape and form of all those deals?
I agree with you. There have been other deals. There are two or three things that we have to note about this trade deal with the United States. First of all, it is not a free trade agreement. The one we concluded with the European Union is a free trade agreement, which is a recognized exception to Article 1, which is MFN of WTO law. This is not a free trade agreement. It's a bilateral trade agreement, which means it only applies to certain specific sectors between United States and India. Second, if it is a bilateral trade agreement, I don't know the kind of dispute settlement resolution mechanisms that we have agreed with the United States. What if there is a difference of view tomorrow? I'm not sure, because it depends on the goodwill of the two sides, the credibility of the two leaders, and so on. So this becomes a little bit more informal, if you like. The last thing to note, of course, is that the United States has gone back and forth with regard to some trading partners by switching from high duties to low duties and low duties back to high duties, South Korea being a case in point. So we will have to be aware of those things. My sense is that because we were subject to a duty of 50% for such a long time, my sense is the US realizes that there is more to be lost than gained by penalizing India. Much better to have India on its side. And we've also, I think, concluded this FTA with the European Union. So there is a feeling I get that the world is betting on India, and therefore India must do everything possible to fully negotiate with US. I've said elsewhere that our strategy of no confrontation, no capitulation, and continued conversation with the United States has borne fruit, and therefore we must stick to that strategy.
Also, let's also examine what Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal has told Parliament earlier today itself. He's been unequivocal about the benefits of this agreement for India's industry, big and small, manufacturers and exporters, while protecting farm and dairy. He's also talked about giving top priority to India's energy security and the need for technology transfers. Now, how critical are all these factors?
Those are important. And I think the Prime Minister, in one of his earlier statements, said listen, I am not going to let down the interests of farmers, small, mediums, entrepreneurs, and fishermen. These are important sectors, and the Prime Minister went as far as to say, if I remember right, that he is willing to pay a price. He knows that India might pay a price, and I suspect to some extent that is the price we have already paid by allowing ourselves to be subject to 50%. So I believe the Commerce Minister when he says that India will have protected the interests of agriculture, dairy, and fisheries, no question, and small and medium entrepreneurs, no question. I think on energy security, it could be interpreted differently. For example, it's true that the government of India is attached to energy security. But the Commerce Minister also made an additional statement that we need to diversify our sources. That could be interpreted to mean that we can move away from Russian purchases, which have already come down anyway, and we will buy more energy from the United States, which may actually be in the interest of the energy security of India. So you could interpret it both ways. My sense is that we will spread the risk as much as possible when it comes to energy imports.
All right. Sounds good so far, and we'll get to know more about it as and when things materialize in the black and white form. Thanks a lot for joining us and talking about it, Master Mohan Kumar. I understand that you're with us a little later in the show as well to talk about another subject. I will not talk about it right now, but thank you for sticking around.